Hello everyone, Sanjak here. So in this video I want to dig into the backstory of La Signora. Now if you're saying there aren't any backstory of La Signora written in game yet, and that is true. However, she used to go by a different name, and for the other name there is quite a bit of backstory. So with that said, this will very likely be a spoiler video, so you have been warned. And furthermore, this will not be spoiling the 2.0 Archon quest, because there was no major Fatui involvement. However, this one will very likely be spoiling the Fatui section of the 2.1 Archon quest, which is the next patch. So with that said, you have been warned. So let's get started. So if you want to hear the conclusion directly, the La Signora is actually the Crimson Witch of Flames, who used to be the Crimson Witch of Flames, the person who the artifact set, the Crimson Witch of Flames, is named after. And that's where you get the most of her backstory from the lore of the 5 different pieces of the Crimson Witch of Flames. On top of that, you can also get a part of her lore from the Pale Flame set, the flower specifically, the Stainless Bloom. Now the reason why this might potentially spoil the 2.1 Archon quest, again, that might happen, so if you do not want that, so please stay away. Now the reason why this one might potentially spoil to the 2.1 Archon quest is that La Signora might become a weekly boss, cough cough, and she might be dropping some material that's very similar to pyro related materials, cough cough. Basically you get the point here. So let's start with the Crimson Witch of Flames and I'll explain her backstory first, then I'll dig into each of the artifact pieces and then tell you where I'm getting the information from. So actually La Signora is over 500 years old at this point. She used to be a native person from Mondstadt, and she used to sing at the Venti statue on a daily basis back when she was still a maiden. And during that singing process, she came into contact with one of the Knights of Favonius at that time. And the knight's name is Rustam, whose nickname is the Wolf Pup. He used to be one of the Knights of Favonius. He works very hard during his own time, up to the point where basically like Jean, sometimes he just faints from overworking. But in his seldom free time, he likes to go to the statue and listen to what the young maiden is singing in order to calm him down. And if you want some connection of this person, he is the original owner of the Favonius sword, as well as Venti's new bow, Allergy for the End. And he is also the founder of all Favonius blade work. So the timeline for all of these is about 500 years ago, right before the fall of Conria. However, not long afterwards, even though the Rustam and this young maiden had some sort of admire for each other, it's not a relationship, it's just a general admire for each other. The young maiden, who is La Signora in this case, went on to study at Sumeru later in the Academia, which is Sumeru's highest scholar central place, which is also the most scholar central place of Teyvat. She went away to study at Academia, and not long after her left, the fall of Conria came along. Essentially what happened, the kingdom of Conria was doomed because the king trusted the alchemist, who later used alchemy to form all sorts of monsters, and as a result, the entire nation of Conria was doomed. All 7 Archons were sent in to try to keep the situation under control. Now of course, there's still a lot of mysteries relating Conria, so I won't be saying what exactly the Archon did, because we still don't know in that case. However, what ended happening, the Archon was not completely able to keep everything under control. The Dendro Archon died during the Conria conflict, and as a result, the monsters was able to break through Conria's walls and start flooding into the rest of Teyvat. Mondstadt was one of the closer nations to Conria, so as a result, Mondstadt, the Knights of Favonius, were sent to fend off these monsters from going further inland to essentially affecting Mondstadt city. Rustam was one of them that was sent. However, as a result, he died mid-battle, and even though Mondstadt won in the end, it was at a pretty heavy cost, and the lives of a lot of Knights of Favonius was lost. The problem was that the young maiden, later the Crimson Witch of Flames, and even later the Signora is completely unaware of this. So after several years, she mastered her elements of pyro. She came back to the land of Mondstadt. After she realized what had happened in Conria and that the person that she admired the most, Rustum, died in the process, she started blaming this on the Anemo Archon Barbados for the thing, which is why later the Signora is holding a very personal grudge against Venti. And eventually she let the pyro element, which is her vision control, completely overwhelm herself, burning his flesh up to the point where she has no tear left to cry. And then at this point she is completely transformed into the Crimson Witch of Flames. However, she was trying to do her best to basically kill any monsters during this time as the Crimson Witch of Flames. She swears to destroy all evil within this world. However, eventually the pyro element she was controlling became out of her control, and she needs a way to shut down the pyro from within her body. And this is when the Fatui came in. This part is explained in the Pale Flame set. So essentially, after she was seeking help from different people, the Jester, who is the first of the Fatui Harbinger, came to him. This Fatui Harbinger made him a deal. By the way, he's also called the Fool, or the first Fatus. And this guy made him a deal. Essentially what happens, this Fatui Harbinger and also the Tsaritsa will use their power of cryo to completely freeze up the pyro from within her body. However, as a result, she will become one of the Fatui Harbingers, and she will swear loyalty to Tsaritsa and to help with their goal of destroying what they think are their enemies, which in this case is the god above all 7 archons, themselves, as well as the Abyss. So this is the short story of how La Signora, who started with a maiden in Mondstadt, now became one of the 11 Fatui Harbingers. By the way, somewhat of a spoiler alert. Almost none of the Fatui Harbingers are native to Snezhnaya. Child is almost like an exception. So now with that said, let's go through all of the 6 pieces of artifacts as well as the storyline. Of course, I won't go through the entire storyline of Rustum because that is a little bit long. However, I will go through the 6 artifact pieces, the 5 pieces of Crimson Witch of Flames, as well as the Flower of the Pale Flame set. And I'll also go through the direct Chinese version of the scene where Venti gets his noses yanked, because that part also gives some insight on why La Signora is the Crimson Witch of Flames. So let's start with the Crimson Witch's, the flower set of the flower piece of the Crimson Witch of Flames. The part to note here is, a crisis century ago dashed all hope of the maiden seeing the future promised to her. This is a crisis century ago is the destruction of Conria. The maiden in this case is La Signora, and future promised to her was the fact that she might potentially eventually go into a relationship with Rustum and having a bright future for herself as just one of the ladies in Mondstadt. Those dear to her, her past days, and her bright future all gone. This essentially means basically her sole focus was on Rustum at this point, so this essentially all points to Rustum, as well as Mondstadt did suffer a heavy casualty from the Conria monsters flooding into Mondstadt. From the ashes, the Crimson Witch Flames was born. She burnt away all of her pain with fire, yet this flower stayed resilient, soft, and moist. So this essentially means she let the pyro control herself instead of she controlling the pyro, and as a result she swears to kill all evil with the power of her flames. Moving on to the feather. A forever burning bird feather. The fire shall burn for all of eternity. Scorched earth followed in her wake, for she chose a path of hell life. Though her fires only touched monsters and demons, people still cured behind closed windows and tried to drive her. But none of that mattered to her. Basically, essentially, after she became the Crimson Witch of Flames, people don't understand her anymore. And this is another theme that is among the first 10 Harbingers of the Fatui. They are all sorts of people that the world does not understand for specific reasons. They're all considered very peculiar, or in some case crazy people within the world, and that's why they all kind of drove together to overthrow what the world is thinking is right, which is what the Fatui is actually trying to do in this case. So basically what they are saying here, because the Crimson Witch of Flames only swear to deal with evil, so she really never harmed anyone even after becoming the Crimson Witch of Flames. However, as a result, because people is fearful of her power, she is not welcomed anywhere. Basically like Yuna's situation before she joined the Knights of Favonius. New hopes were burst from the fire of old pains. She needed not to be comforting or sympathy. Churning up her side, the bird gave her all the understanding she needs. Moving on to the Hourglass. A small vessel containing a high-temperature liquid. It is said to be the molten souls of evil spirits. A special hydro timepiece given to the Crimson Witch before Calamity struck, back when she was still a maiden, and once yet embarked on her journey. One cycle. So this hydro piece, actually I don't know much regarding. I assume this is given by Rustum, given to her by Rustum, because during the story, of course I'll not reference that here, because if I go into that, this video will be easily 40 minutes long. However, during that story, they did exchange gifts with each other before she left, so this is most likely the piece given. However, will that mean Rustum comes back as a playable character in the future with a hydro vision? We don't know. However, just to note that the hydro piece is not too important in the story here. Essentially what happens was this is the gift given to her by Rustum before they left, back when she was still a maiden singing at the cathedral in Mondstadt. Before the Calamity struck, here is again pointing at the fell of Conria, and had not yet embarked on her journey means her move to Sumeru to study for the ability to control her pyro elemental vision. One cycle was the right time required to finish her study at the academia. By the time the countdown ended and she returned to her hometown, its previous owner had become a casualty of the crisis. So this essentially is that she is very gifted. It only took her, basically similar to Lisa, it took her very short of time to study at the academia. If you don't know academia, again, it is like basically the only so-called university in Tibet, in the sense that it is the highest research organization within Tibet, and it is located in Sumeru, whom is within the Dendro region, and the Archon is the Archon of Wisdom, which explains why Sumeru is the highest academical / research facility in all of Tibet. Basically, for the last sentence, when she came back home, the previous owner of this hydro timepiece, again Rustum, has become a casualty of the crisis. Essentially, he died while trying to save Mondstadt. Her maiden years were over. The Crimson Witch of Flames was born, and with her the era of destruction. The timepiece bore witness to the days of monsters and the pain they caused until they were all burnt away. Again, she basically went on a killing spree after that, but she was only killing monsters, of course, but still people feared her because she kinda gone crazy. Moving on to the cup or the goblet, a clear bottle containing liquid fire. The techniques involved in making the liquid fire has been since lost. The Crimson Witch of Flames walked upon the earth, burning monsters into cinders. Rumors said how she sacrificed her mortal body to become an embodiment of the liquid fire itself. Still, love and longing once dwelt in her maiden heart until fire burnt away that beautiful and fragile part. Thus, she became the witch that historians were loath to remember. So essentially, pretty much the same thing here again. But this is exactly the part where they talked about how she sacrificed her mortal body to become the embodiment of liquid fire herself. So at this point, you can think of it as she is no longer controlling her pyro vision. The pyro element is controlling her in a sense where she no longer has full control of her own body. But still, she is only trying to kill monsters. She has never damaged any human. And this might also be one of the reasons why La Signora, her right eye is always covered up with that beautiful piece of fancy eyewear, I guess. As a way similar to what Dainsleif and the Abyss Herald might have going on, that her right eye might be forever damaged by the fire up to the point where it would be very ugly to show it to actual people, which is why she is covering it up. So again, this is saying that even though she has given in herself to her rage in flames, where she is turning basically into the very embodiment of justice and basically killing all monsters, however, she still has that fragile heart within her, and she still wanted this to come to an end one day. And finally, we move on to the circlet or the headpiece. A traditional witch pointed hat with a large brim. It grants a witch the reverence and fear which she commands. To the Crimson Witch of Flame, this large hat shielded her from surrounding distractions. It was how she was able to bone her pyro skills when she was still an apprentice. In combat, she needed not to pay attention to the monsters disintegrating in flames, nor did she need to look at her own burnt face in the water's reflection. And so the Crimson Witch continued to burn blind and extend in her devastation. So essentially, same thing here, just proving what I said before. Essentially, her face is burned, so that pretty much means that that right eye might very well be damaged, which is why she's wearing that piece to cover it up. And same case here, she is killing monsters, and there is nothing that she can do about it to stop her body from getting completely consumed by the pyro element. And this is where the stainless bloom, the sixth piece of artifact from the flower artifact from the Pale Flame set, come in. You astound me. You have but a human body, and yet you carry such a power within you. You claim that you have no fear, no tears left to cry, no blood left to shed. But surely this is because you have filled yourself with fire. Though your body has been long covered in scars, fierce flames are all that now may flow, like molten iron from your eyes and your wounds. But we appear to have gotten off topic. The reason I follow the trail of smoke and track you down is that I wish to strike a deal with you. Let the flames that now devour you be extinguished by the grace of Her Majesty. What say you? So essentially, this is the dialogue that was exchanged between the first Fatus, the first of the Fatui Harbingers, and in this case, La Signora. Basically, the deal, as you've heard here, is Tsaritsa will cool her down so that she can return to a somewhat human body form, and as a result, she will bow loyal to the Tsaritsa, and also they will work together in their overall goal of overthrowing what is the god above the seven archons doing. The first Fatus gave power to a young woman in whom the flame of life had all but died, and in her wild imagination she saw the line that lay between the crop past and the stainless future. I understand then. Let glacial ice take the place of my erased past and extinguish these undying flames. Let the darkness of corruption, the pain of the world and humans, beasts, and the sin they carry all be purged into silent ice. But despite this, a pure white flame continued to burn within her heart. We share the same goal, you, your Tsaritsa, and I. Cleanse the source of distortion in the world, short-sighted, ignorant gods, and the darkness of the corruption of the abyss. Good, I'll do whatever it takes to become an effective instrument in the achievement of our common cause. For even I dress in the pure white from head to toe, the ashes of the dead that had long left their stain on every inch of my being can never be cleansed. So this is quite a bit more tip on why this is the La Signora here that they're talking about. Now, of course, from the first half we can establish the relationship that this stainless bloom is also talking about the Crimson Witch of Flames, and for the second part here, La Signora is pretty much dressed white from head to toe except a few black and red pieces to mix in, because those are the Fatui colors. So this essentially means that we can establish the relationship here that La Signora is the Crimson Witch of Flames, and this established here that this piece is talking about La Signora, which means we can establish the relationship that La Signora is the Crimson Witch of Flames. So there isn't much to talk about, and that is all we have here. Finally, the thing I want to direct you guys to is the original Chinese thing that is used during the cutscene, where especially the opening speech of La Signora before she yanked everything out of the Venti before she yanked the Gnosis out of Venti. I know the English scene is doing a good job, however I don't think it conveys enough information as the original Chinese thing. So I'll translate sentence by sentence. The first sentence, basically she was saying at last she was able to find the hamster, or in this case the mice, that has been hiding within her house. So essentially she is saying her house here while she is in Mondstadt. This essentially very much implies that she is native to Mondstadt, which I've said before is the case. The second one, she was basically saying Venti being kind of sort of a waste, was basically stealing, was basically begging here and doing that stuff there, was basically not doing his job, and at the same time is somewhat leeching off the people of Mondstadt, was basically what she was trying to say here. The third sentence was basically she was saying that Venti caused quite a bit of trouble for Mondstadt. This one's direct enough. So I believe that's all the rest that needs to be said, because the rest of the speech is not very needed for this part. But if you're wondering what the rest of the speech is saying, Venti was saying it was not a hamster, it's a mice, basically calling the Signora a mice, and the Signora got angrier and kicked Venti and froze Venti, and then sort of kicked him once and yanked out the noses. And afterwards, the Signora was basically saying that the noses was not as beautiful as her chess pieces, and Venti was replying, "You had no sense of beauty." And afterwards, he got kicked. That was about that part. But this, I believe, all of these added together does show that La Signora is the Crimson Witch of Flames who used to be native to Mondstadt. And on top of that, again, the fact that she might become a weekly boss, cough cough, and the fact that she might drop some pyro-related boss ascension material, cough cough, is enough to show that, is enough to add the solid proof to the point that she is the Crimson Witch of Flames. So hopefully I didn't spoil too much for you guys. I tried to do as less as possible, and of course that's all the information I have for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. Thank you and have a nice day.